The sun rose gently over the horizon, scattering flecks of gold across the waters of the small coastal village. Waves lapped against the shore, a soothing counterpoint to the cries of gulls overhead. Most villagers here made their living from the sea, passing tradition from father to son, mother to daughter, generation. The old wooden boats, patched with pieces of driftwood and painted in faded colors, reflected a long-held resilience of a people who understood that nature could be both generous and harsh. They had seen storms batter their homes, pulling boats out to sea and washing entire livelihoods away. Yet, with each new day, they ventured out again, determined to reap the bounty that the ocean could still yield. In this community, traditions ran deep. At sunup, fishermen traveled out on the tide to places where the water glimmered like glass. There, they cast their nets, hoping for a catch that would feed their families and fill the fish market stands. Among them was Joran, a slender but strong man in his late 40s. The lines on his face spoke of many early mornings in storms weathered. On this particular morning, he and his longtime friend Rafi were headed out, eager to test the water. Doran's son Kamal, only 15, perched quietly in the bow, dreams of future voyages shining in his eyes. It was Kamal who first caught a sight of something unusual floating in the distance. Initially, it looked like drifting seaweed or perhaps a piece of debris that broke free from a passing cargo ship. However, as they navigated closer, the shape began to move in weak, erratic motions. Joran narrowed his eyes and carefully raised his binoculars, focusing on a gray figure with a dorsum fin. His pulse quickened. "A dolphin," he whispered. No one had seen a dolphin near their village for years. Dolphins typically stayed a bit farther offshore, preferring deeper, cooler waters. But there it was, floundering at the surface. Ruffy cursed under his breath. "He looks hurt," he muttered, noticing the frantic splashes and abrupt stops. The creature seemed unable to swim properly. Joran set the binoculars aside, his jaw tightening. Aware of the risk and the unpredictability of dealing with an injured wild animal, they still maneuvered the boat to approach. Joran eased the throttle down. The closer they got, the more tragically real the sight became. The dolphin wore a deep gash across its side, like a wound inflicted by a propeller or a fishing net that had cut to the muscle. Blood mingled with the seawater, leaving a muddy trail. The dolphin's eyes, warm and round, were wide with panic and pain. Kamal gasped, his heartbeat pounding in his temples. He felt a wave of pity. Joran and Rafi exchanged concerned glances. Retrieving an injured wild dolphin from the ocean was dangerous. It could thrash, cause capsizing, or injure someone with a powerful, sudden movement. Yet they all understood that without help, the dolphin stood no chance. Carefully, they draped a makeshift sling of nets along the boat's side. Sliding it under the weak dolphin took gentleness and courage, and at times it jerked in fear. Kamal spoke softly, willing the creature to understand they meant no harm. The net cradled it, and together they lifted the animal aboard with a strained heave. Once the dolphin was settled, the fishermen worked swiftly. Joran wet towels with buckets of seawater, distributing them along its rubbery gray back to keep the skin moist. The wind picked up, bringing salt into their hair and eyelashes, but they paid no heed. Rafi scrambled through a small medical kit he kept for emergencies, uncertain how to tend to the deep slash. It was Kamal who tore long strips of cloth from an old sail, creating a makeshift bandage to press gently against the wound. Throughout the ordeal, the dolphin's eyes seemed locked on them, almost pleading, almost trusting. For the first time in Kamal's life, he gazed into the eyes of a creature as intelligent as himself, perhaps even more in tune with the rhythms of the sea than any human could be. After the emergency care, Joran guided the boat back to shore, worried about exposing the dolphin too long to open air and the hot sun. Word traveled swiftly through the village, as wordless signals and quick words passed between fishermen at the docks and women washing clothes by the shore. By the time Joran's crew returned to land, a small crowd had gathered. Children pressed forward with curiosity, their eyes shining at the rare sight. The elders, arms folded across their chests, looked on with skepticism or concern for what this could mean. The headman of the village, an older gentleman named Ghana, approached, leaning heavily on a weathered cane. "What do you plan to do with this creature?" Ghana asked. Tradition often dictated that if a strange or injured sea creature was found, it might be returned to the water, or in some sad cases, put out of its misery if no chance of recovery was apparent. But Joran had already decided his course. "With permission," Joran said, "I'd like to bring it to old Saburi. She knows about healing creatures, not just humans." Saburi was a revered elder who lived inland. She was known to cure livestock of diseases, mend broken wings of birds, and nurse stray cats. Some swore she had once nursed a turtle with a cracked shell back to health. If anyone could help this dolphin, it would be her. Ghana frowned a little, but then nodded. "Very well. Hurry, before the poor thing suffers further." Everyone helped slide the makeshift sling onto a cart, and Kamal and Rafi lifted the handle at the front, pulling it quickly along the winding path. People lined the way, whispering prayers or simply watching in awe. Sunbeams fell between the leaves of palm and neem trees, illuminating the sorrowful procession. Within minutes, they arrived at Saburi's small yard, where the elder sat outside weaving baskets. She stopped mid-braid, eyes sharp with concern as they carried the dolphin into her yard. "My goodness," she breathed. "I've never had something quite like this." But rather than shrink away, her hands reached out gently, assessing the wound with experienced care. With Kamal's help, she set up a large, shallow trough that was normally used to soak cane for basket weaving. They filled it with water from the well, mixed with salt to mimic the ocean's salinity as best they could, all the while pouring additional pails to maintain the temperature. Balancing the dolphin's comfort with medical needs was a collective endeavor. While Saburi cleaned the wound with medicinal herbs and a mild antiseptic solution, Kamal stroked the dolphin's dorsal fin, trying to calm it. The creature emitted soft clicks and whistles, as though expressing both anxiety and gratitude. Saburi placed her weathered palms against the dolphin's flank with surprising tenderness. "What a fighter," she said softly. "This one still believes there's more of life ahead." She lathered ointments onto the wound and fashioned bandages that wouldn't dissolve quickly in the water. The process took hours, punctuated by frequent breaks to let both the dolphin and its human carers rest. By nightfall, Saburi had placed the animal in a makeshift sea pen near the shore, a cordoned-off zone in shallow water. She directed the villagers to erect wooden posts and tie nets that would keep predators out and the injured dolphin contained. Overhead, the moon hung low, its silver glow caressing the still waters of the tiny enclosure. Kamal stood watch, determined not to let the dolphin out of his sight. He named it Hope, convinced that its survival would bring something intangible back to the village. A renewed sense of wonder, perhaps. In the following days, the villagers found themselves drawn to the small enclosure like it was a healing shrine. Children arrived first thing in the morning, kneeling at the net's edge to watch Hope swim circles, slowly regaining strength. Fishermen, initially curious about the distracting project, became staunch supporters when they saw how it lifted everyone's spirits. Even the local women, who mostly busied themselves with market tasks and household chores, brought freshly prepared sardines and other small fish so that the dolphin could feed without depleting the fishermen's catch. Sensing the communal reverence for what they had done, Joran and Rafi grew proud. They'd risked their boat and limbs to save a creature rarely seen, and that small act of mercy was transforming the mindset of an entire village. There was an electrifying sense of kinship with nature in the air. It was as though saving one dolphin rekindled love for all marine life. People talked in hushed tones about how insane it was that sea creatures got hurt by propellers and plastic. Diligent children were now picking up litter along the beach. Parents began telling stories of what the ocean meant to their forefathers, tales that had drifted into the shadows of memory. Some nights, Kamal would stand by the fence, listening to the nighttime calls of insects and frogs, watching Hope drift in the moonlit water. The healing wound was smaller now. Hope floated near the surface, occasionally letting out a faint whistle that sounded like a question. Kamal would whisper in reply, telling stories of the day's events, We caught a big basket of mackerel, he might say. Or, Saburi tested the salt levels in the water. She says you're doing better. He was never certain if Hope fully understood, but he felt that the creature sensed the kindness in his voice. In those moments, Boy and Dolphin shared a silent, tender bond. As word spread beyond the village, curiosity seekers began arriving. Some were from neighboring towns. Others were travelers passing through, having heard rumors of a rescued dolphin in a quiet coastal corner. They came to witness the heartfelt care with their own eyes. A few misguided visitors tried to feed the dolphin inappropriate snacks, crackers, candy, pieces of fruit, only to be gently scolded by the new wave of local guardians. Indeed, such a commotion was unusual for this sleepy fishing post, whose denizens usually only interacted with outsiders at the fish market in the nearest city. Now, stalls selling fresh coconuts and sweet treats popped up near the enclosure as people seized the chance to make a small extra income. The presence of a wounded dolphin became a catalyst for unexpected tourism. Still, not everyone embraced this turn of events. A few older fishermen, those who believed the ocean was there to be harnessed and that sentimental attachments to animals were foolish, grumbled at the shift. They disliked the crowd, the noise, and the sudden protective measures that forced them to be more careful with how they disposed of fishing nets. Some saw the presence of tourists as meddlesome, worried it might lead to regulations on their fishing routes. This tension simmered, but the presence of Ghana and Saburi's strong moral authority kept it from boiling over. For now, the majority opinion was that the dolphin's well-being was worth the adjustments. One day, a small incident tested this unity. A group of rowdy teenagers from another village slipped into the enclosure late at night. They wanted to touch the dolphin and take pictures. Spooked by their flashes and loud jeers, Hope thrashed, inadvertently ripping a piece of net that formed part of the sea pen. By dawn, villagers discovered that a corner of the enclosure had collapsed, leaving an opening wide enough for Hope to potentially escape into deeper waters where it might still not survive. Alarm raced through the community. Some people rushed to their fishing boats, scanning the horizon for any sign of a lone dorsal fin. It was Kamal, eyes stinging with tears at the thought that Hope might tragically vanish when almost healed, who discovered that the dolphin was still hovering near the damaged enclosure. Hope hadn't fled, perhaps feeling a connection to the village or lacking the strength to return fully to the open ocean. It lingered out of loyalty or necessity. Relieved, Kamal immediately coaxed it closer, reassuring the frightened animal. The incident stirred anger in the villagers. Many insisted that if outside visitors were going to come, they needed to respect the boundaries and well-being of the creature. So Ghana established a set of rules. The enclosure was closed to visitors at night, and only local fishermen, Saburi, Kamal, and a few other volunteers were allowed inside to maintain or feed Hope. Rafi set up a small patrol, rotating shifts to keep the area supervised after dark. A small group of troublemakers from the neighboring town faced stern lectures and were made to help repair the nets they had torn. Embarrassed by their actions, the teenagers apologized to Kamal directly. He accepted their apologies, hoping it might spark growth in them as well. In the weeks that followed, Hope's wound grew markedly smaller. Saburi announced that the healing was nearly complete. Even so, the question of what would happen once the dolphin recovered haunted everyone's mind. Dolphins were social creatures. No one was sure if it had a pod waiting somewhere offshore. Biologists or marine experts from bigger cities seldom ventured this far, so the villagers had to rely on their own intuition and Saburi's guidance. Finally, Saburi concluded that once Hope was strong enough to swim and hunt without difficulty, it should return to the open sea. Bjorn and Rafi agreed. They understood that the best thing for a wild dolphin was freedom. Yet Kamal found himself torn. He worried that the world beyond the shallow bay would be unkind, that another boat propeller or fishing net might cross Hope's path with lethal consequences. He also felt a personal ache at the idea of letting go of this new friend. Over time, he had grown to see Hope as not just an animal, but almost like another villager, one who brought unity and a sense of wonder. The prospect of saying goodbye was daunting. When the day finally arrived, the entire village produced a flurry of activity. Kamal stood waist-deep in the water with the others who had volunteered to guide Hope past the net, out beyond the shore. They were helping the dolphin acclimate once more to deeper waters. Hope seemed both eager and hesitant, swimming in widening circles as if testing newly mended strength. The vivid sunrise painted clouds in hues of pink and orange as if blessing the occasion. Eventually, Joran directed the group further out in a small flotilla of boats. Hope followed, occasionally leaping out of the water, though still carefully, energy not yet at its peak. The crowd on the beach cheered. Children used seashell horns to produce a low, haunting sound. Drums pounded softly, a rhythmic heartbeat of encouragement. Even Ghana ventured partway into the shallows to watch the spectacle, leaning against his cane with watery eyes. High above, gulls circled in excitement, as if they too sensed the significance of this moment. Staff in hand, Saburi led a series of gestures that were part blessing, part farewell. She sprinkled droplets of herbal water over the waves, chanting words of gratitude to the sea. Kamal's throat felt tight as he watched Hope slip further away from the enclosure. For a moment, the dolphin disappeared beneath the surface, and fear clutched him. But then, like a final goodbye, Hope soared out of the water in a graceful arc, a silver shape glinting under the morning sun. Water droplets cascaded off its sleek body, catching sunlight in a glittering spray. With that, Hope vanished into the open ocean, free at last. The days following Hope's release held a quiet sort of longing. An unspoken question lingered. Would the dolphin remember them? Perhaps return from time to time? Or was this a goodbye forever? Village life continued. Nets were cast, fish were sold, and chores resumed, but something had changed. Everyone moved with greater care, mindful of what might lurk beneath the waters. Littering became practically non-existent. The kids, once uninterested in the environment, became champions of beach cleanup. The older fishermen who had once scoffed started taking note of plastic bits that could harm sea life. And a sense of caretaking spread, fueled by a new awareness that the sea's creatures, no matter how large or mysterious, deserved compassion. Occasionally, visitors still came, hopeful for a glimpse of the fabled rescued dolphin. Though they might be disappointed not to find Hope in the pen, they often left enchanted by the village itself. The villagers shared stories, explaining how the rescue had united them in protecting the ocean and its wonders. A few more humble accommodations were built for overnight guests, offering a small but reliable income boost. Some predicted that if more dolphins passed by, ecotourism could be a new path for prosperity, balancing tradition with modernity. Even Ghana, once wary, conceded that the experience had underscored how the ocean was more than just a source of fish. It housed an entire world that was interconnected with their own survival. One pre-dawn morning, Kamal woke to an inexplicable urge to go down to the beach. The moon still hung low, casting a faint glow across the waves. The tide was high, lapping at the small breakwater near the old pier. He strolled along, hugging the shoreline. Just as the first pink hints of sunrise appeared, Kamal heard a series of distant whistles. His heart leapt. He stood, scanning the faint silhouettes on the horizon. Suddenly, a small group of dolphins appeared, dorsal fins slicing the water's surface. They leapt and spiraled in the gentle surf. One in particular jumped with an extra flair, as if to perform a greeting dance. Kamal's lips curled into a wide grin, tears threatening to spill. The group swam closer, close enough that he could see the lines on the belly of one. He couldn't be certain, but he thought he recognized a faint scar along the side, where the old wound might have healed. Could it be Hope? A flood of gratitude filled him. With a careful splash, he waded into the water, calling softly. The dolphins chirped and clicked back, swirling around, frolicking in the early morning hush. For a few minutes, it felt like time had stopped. Soon, the tide began to carry them away. Others in the village, awakened by the excited sounds, rushed to see what was happening. By the time they arrived, the dolphins were drifting toward open sea, bright fins flashing in the rising sunlight. Some villagers exclaimed in awe, while others simply watched with quiet smiles. It was a brief visitation, but enough to confirm that the bond forged weeks ago hadn't dissolved. Perhaps it would never fully disappear. Hope was alive, thriving, and with friends. The memory of pain, fear, and rescue now gave way to a new chapter, one of resilience and connection. In the aftermath of those sightings, the village's sense of optimism and stewardship took deeper root. New projects sprouted, like Raffi's plan to mark out safe boat lanes away from suspected dolphin zones, or Yorn's initiative to start a conservation youth club teaching children to care for marine habitats. Siburi continued using her knowledge of herbs to treat injured or sick animals. She educated young mothers on how the sea and land were interwoven, let them taste the various plants that grew by brackish waters, and taught them which ones could help humans too. Kamal, for his part, found a new love for reading. One traveling teacher who had visited out of curiosity donated biology textbooks and pamphlets about marine science. Kamal pored over them in the evenings, absorbing knowledge about dolphins' behaviors, migratory patterns, and intelligence. He dreamed of one day studying marine biology, perhaps returning to the village to ensure that animals like Hope were protected. Whenever he passed the now empty enclosure, a rush of wonder came over him, reminding him of how a single act of kindness had the power to shift the destiny of an entire community. As the months rolled by, the memory of the rescue became something of a legend. Parents told their children, "When we cared for the wounded dolphin, it taught us how to see the world as one family, human, dolphin, and all creatures." The younger generation grew up internalizing this message, and their efforts became an evolving legacy of environmental stewardship. Fishing methods became gentler, with more sustainable practices. Visitors still arrived occasionally, eager to find glimpses of playful fins near the shore. Yet, even if they didn't see a dolphin, they often left touched by the villagers' warmth and commitment to respecting life. Eventually, life settled into a new normal, but there were reminders everywhere of that extraordinary chapter. The battered old net that Yoren used as a sling was now framed and hung in the local school, a symbol of courage and community spirit. The shallow cove was meticulously maintained, free from debris. Huts and stalls near the beach included signs in bright paint. "Protect marine life. We saved a dolphin. We can save more." And "Keep the ocean clean." Simple messages, but charged with genuine conviction. On a quiet afternoon, shortly before the monsoon season threatened the coastline with tumultuous winds, Kamal took a lone boat ride. He steered gently beyond the headland, scanning the deepest blue of the horizon. The sun was still bright, reflecting like molten gold across the rippling surface. He cut the engine, letting the boat drift. For a while, he just soaked in the rhythmic sound of water against wood. Perhaps he hoped to see a fin slicing through the waves. Perhaps he simply wanted to feel closer to the world that had brought him hope. He closed his eyes, imagining the gentle clicks of dolphins communicating underwater, the swirl of fishes forming a shimmering school, and the heartbeat of the sea itself. What a gift it was to be part of something so vast. Even though no dolphins broke the surface that day, he felt their presence coursing through every wave. He felt the gratitude they had imparted and the sense of wonder that enveloped the village. In those moments, the dividing line between human and ocean blurred, leaving behind an unshakable truth. They were all connected, all reliant on each other's well-being. When Kamal returned to shore, gliding the boat onto the sand, he noticed small footprints weaving around the water's edge. Children collecting seashells, every bit as fascinated by the ocean's gifts as he was. He smiled, recalling how his own fascination with the sea had led him to help rescue a dolphin. He realized that the work was not finished. There were still nets that threatened marine life, polluted waters that jeopardized the future, ignorance that lingered. But there was also hope. Hope in the little footsteps that chased the retreating waves, in the fishermen who now banded together to protect what they once took for granted, and in the wide, ever-shifting sea that had both battered and sustained them over generations. Even though hope had swum away into the wide, mysterious ocean, the village carried the dolphin story inside their hearts. They would never forget the moment they lifted a wounded living being onto their worn wooden boat, or the days of dedicated care that followed, or that sunrise farewell when hope finally reclaimed its freedom. Through it all, the village discovered that when compassion and determination combined, extraordinary things happen, and that sometimes saving one life can reveal a whole new way to live.